Hi again, everybody. Welcome into another edition. Happy Wednesday if you're listening to this on a Wednesday or whichever day you may be listening and watching. Thank you for joining us. Cross Functionality, the show connecting coaching, baseball, softball, male, female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. As we get started today with episode 57, we're talking becoming a fearless athlete. I'm not doing this alone. I never do it alone. Let me bring in my friend and co-host, softball national champion at the University of Alabama and current day renowned coach, Cassie Reilly-Boccia. Modern star of Modern Family, her own Modern Family today as we record this.
That's right. Well, Sunday family dinners, yes. And if you ever watch Modern Family, it seems like they always get together on a Sunday.
Very, very Italian-like, those Sunday dinners. My grandfather, by the way, used to have some of those, but he never would really make any good dishes. He always make like meatloaf, which I can't stand. Or eggplant, which I can't stand either. I've never had eggplant, and it's not aesthetically pleasing. And I'm always from the school of, if it's not aesthetically pleasing as a dish, as a food dish, I'm not going to eat it. Sorry.
All right. Well, to make anyone jealous, my husband's father, so my father-in-law used to own pizza places, and he's making stromboli and chicken rolls from scratch. And then we are also having mini meatball wedges.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's
really perked up there.
Yeah. So we got some good food today.
Stromboli is a hit and miss, by the way. If you put too much meat on the stromboli, then it's not really stromboli anymore. Although I'm not a big meat guy on my sandwiches either. I like more bread to meat ratio than meat to bread ratio.
I think it just depends. It's always I'm always a big fan of the ingredients, whatever's being stuffed inside or how it's being made, and so.
I do like pepperoni inside the stromboli. I prefer that, if anything.
There you go.
The pepperoni.
I think we're having a smorgasbord of decisions for our strombolis today.
Yeah. Well, so that's Modern Family aside there, Italian dinner aside, Sunday dinner aside. We're talking today, episode 57, becoming a fearless athlete. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, when we were preparing for the show. When I was a kid, I've always had a fear of heights. Do you fear heights, by the way? Is that I mean,
not as an adult. As a kid, I did. I used to hate being at the top of steps, and now it's like I could climb a ladder and it's no big deal.
I'm talking like really high.
Okay, yeah.
Really, I mean, I'm still afraid of heights to this day. I mean, I could get on top of my house or my roof, and I can be okay. But I'm talking like, when you're at Disney and you have to go up those long, windy stairs. What's that one slide at Blizzard Beach at Disney, right? You have to go up those long, windy stairs, very, very high. And then when you get to the top, you're you're parallel, eye level with the top of the, what's that tower? The Tower of Doom or whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Tower of Terror, right?
There you go.
That's the kind of height that I'm talking about, that I'm afraid of. Anyway, when I was a kid, it was a lot worse. And I remember being at the community pool. This is when I was 8, 9 years old, when I, in the summer or whatever it was. And I was always afraid to go onto the high diving board, right? But eventually I made myself go up to the high diving board. I worked my way up, and it was part of it was because I was more confident. And once I actually did it and jumped in the pool from that high diving board, I felt perfectly fine, and I felt like I could continue to do it over and over again. So becoming a fearless athlete, I think the main nucleus of all of that is becoming as confident as you possibly could. I became confident that I was going to live and be okay diving off that diving board. And I think with athletes becoming fearless, the confidence is such a huge part of all that.
For sure. And I think, so many times we look at someone, we're like, man, that person's so confident. And we forget that confidence and fear, honestly, both are relative, right? You have Navy SEALs that can go off and do some of the craziest things, yet they could still be afraid of a spider, right? So it's, you have this, it depends on the situation for our confidence, and it also depends on the situation for our fearlessness too. And I think what starts to happen and we definitely see it with athletes that we coach, I saw it in myself as an athlete. You might be really confident and fearless in high school ball, and then you go to travel ball and it changes. Or you might be really, really confident and fearless on defense, and then you come to offense in a really pressure situation and you haven't quite conquered that level of fear. So it's something too, as a parent and coach that maybe didn't experience it or maybe has been removed from the game. I have parents sometimes being like, man, they do so well until this happens. And I'm like, all right, well, this isn't like a swing issue then. There's a lot more to this. So absolutely. I think the two are so intertwined, and I have to imagine, like, how good did you feel when you finally did do the hype, right? It's like this, even like, it's like a next level euphoria, confident feeling, right? Like,
Well,
it feels kind of taking.
the thing about it was I kept then after that I kept doing it over and over
Yep.
and over
It's
again.
no big deal then.
Right? It became
Mhm.
no big deal. So that's why I think like confidence is just a vital part. I mean, it's a vital part of anything in athletics or anything in life, but becoming a fearless athlete and doing it within the confines of your game plan, so to speak, of what your coach wants, right? You don't want to become, as we're talking about next week, playing with heart, breaking that myth. You don't want to play with heart. You want to still play smart, but you still want to be that fearless athlete that is not really afraid to fail, because that's another thing too that kind of weighs on your mind a little bit as an athlete. Hey, I'm afraid to fail here, and that prevents you from becoming that fearless athlete.
Oh, for sure. It's funny. My first like real experience where I felt so like a vine holding me back almost was
Mm-hmm.
I got moved from first base to the outfield, and I had never ever had an issue diving before ever. But the idea, for some reason, I went to the outfield. Running full sprint into a dive is very different than being at first base taking 2 steps and diving, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure it out, and it was coming across, I was trying to process so much as I was going for a ball in the outfield that all of a sudden I forgot to just be fearless, go all out and go for the ball, right? And it was, I felt so held back by this fear of missing the ball, this fear of screwing up. Here I am on the biggest stage. I've been dreaming about this, and now I'm in a situation where my confidence is negative in the outfield right now.
Sure.
So it was interesting that I almost had to, I remember Murphy saying, he goes, "I want fearless to be written across your forehead." And so I went in the mirror that night. I took an Expo marker out, and right where my forehead was, I wrote fearless in my my mirror. And that was, I just kept asking myself, what would a fearless outfielder look like? How would they run? How would they train? How would they do this? And, those questions made me mentally at least prepare for getting over those big humps of how low my confidence was when I did transition to the outfield.
Well, it brings up the question, though, how did you decipher between being fearless but also playing smart? Because there are certain
Mm.
times, obviously, as you know, you can't dive in the outfield.
Right.
You I mean, one out, nobody on. Of course, you can dive for a ball, but, second, third, one out, you're trying to dive for a ball. This applies to baseball, too, outfielders. Then you're screwed, because if it gets by you, those runs are scoring.
For
Right.
sure. I think where my situation was in the fall, I was still in a practice mode of like just learning a brand new skill type thing.
Yeah.
However, our biggest thing was if it's foul, dive all you want. You have like there's no harm, no foul there. And then the other thing was the trajectory of the ball. So we would sit there a lot in the outfield, not even going after balls, and just sit there during BP with the outfield coach. And they'd say, okay, on that one, would you have dove or would you have let it drop? Would you have dove or would you let it drop? Because there is a trajectory where if it's a high fly ball that when it's going to land, it's not going to go anywhere, that's a fairly safe ball to dive after. When you have a ball that's on a different trajectory that's going to hit and skip if it gets by you, either now you're doing a little bit more like pop-up slide to keep it in front of you, let's say, or the dive is just not worth it at that point. It's also gauging, hey, is my other outfielder behind me? Is it a ball, is a right center fielder trying to cut off a gap, and the center fielder is behind you? All those things go into play. And it is a lot. It's not like second nature to everybody to just be like, oh, I'm going to know exactly when to do it. So that was so valuable to just sit there for those 30 minutes every now and then. Or even when we're watching games on TV, just talking about the strategy behind it, because that's huge. So once I got over the hump of the skill, then it was learning, that whole process as well, knowing the situation and all that.
Right. I think with everything you're saying there, part of becoming a fearless athlete is also becoming a smart and educated athlete as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can't just be like a reckless abandon all the time, because then you can also get yourself hurt. I said, go ahead, dive all you want, a foul ball, but when you start playing with fences and we start playing, not just an open field as a little leaguer, that's a real thing to consider. You're not diving headfirst into a fence. That is not that's not something that's going to help anybody.
Yeah.
So their fearlessness is honestly this ability to, again, it's showing up to discomfort, it's showing up to failure, and it's saying, you know what, I know this is going to be hard and this might not work, but I'm confident in my decision here, and you're able to actually go for it. And that's that's when you start to see, I think, an athlete's true ability shine, because they're not being held back by this fear of failure, or in some cases even like a fear of success they might be holding back from. But I mean, shoot, I think the second time I've ever seen it or in myself was at the plate, right? Like, let's say your swing feels off, you're low on confidence that day, you're just not seeing the ball well, and then your pitch comes right where you want it and you take it and you're like, golly, like, why?
Yeah.
what am I thinking? Why am I so bound up here? But it's this fear of screwing up almost, or fear of just, I don't have my swing with me right now. Where
I was gonna say, how do you become a fearless athlete when it comes to hitting?
Mm-hmm. I have to, so right, confidence comes from your preparation. So in my case, it was, if I ever felt like I couldn't visualize a pitch, I was fearing it for some reason, or for even a situation. First pitch strikes always held me up a little bit. So I would put my walkout song on and I would practice walking from the on deck circle to the batter's box, and I would practice the first pitch, and I would practice visualizing the first pitch strike. And I would, in scrimmages, really try to force myself to be way more aggressive than I normally would, because you're trying to find opportunities to really work on that. That's when you're going to do it. But it's such a mentality first. It's not, the hitters with the best swings are not always the most confident. They're not always the most fearless when it comes to that. But if you've prepared like crazy, like if you feel like there was no rock unturned, like you did exactly what you had to do, you busted your butt, when you walk up to the plate, what do you have to be afraid of then anymore, right? Like there's a lot that can be handled before that actually happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you kind of took away all that fear right there when you really think about it, and visualizing is a big part of that. We did an episode on visualization back in the archives, so go back and take a listen. Apple, Google, Spotify. We do appreciate that. Softball Strength Academy YouTube page. Take a listen as well. Today, episode 57. Next week, episode 58. We're going to break that myth of playing with heart, playing smarter. We're going to break that myth, because that's one thing that I just absolutely can't stand, playing with heart. So we're going to talk about that next week. But when we talk today about becoming a fearless athlete, and I think that, we have to really unpack a little more about the fear of failure, though, just overall as an athlete. And I'm wondering if that fear of failure stops them from becoming an athlete, meaning stops them from becoming the best they can possibly be, and maybe subconsciously stops them from training as best they possibly could, not going head first in the swimming pool, pun intended, when they are training, and it's stopping them from becoming the best athlete that they can be. That's an athlete with fear rather than being a fearless athlete.
For sure. And this is one of those things too, where I'll be with athletes in training, and I see it right away. They're the way they speak about themselves, how low their self-confidence is, or how they'll come up and be like, I'm not very good at this, I'm not blah blah blah, and they're setting themselves up to be, hey, even if I fail, it's not going to hurt so bad, because I just let everyone else know I don't even think I'm that good. And so there is a fine line where that is a mental performance. Like there's a lot of things I can interject there, but if that is so deeply rooted for them in like their self-love and self-appreciation, that could potentially that could be stemming from a mental health thing as well. So you do have athletes who it's the actually going for it and failing, going all in and working hard and actually setting themselves and be like, you know what, I think I can do this. I think I can do this. And then failing, that is too big of a crushing loss for them. That fear of that failure is too much. So it's easier for them to half-ass it in practice, to not go all out, to state to everyone in the room, I'm not good enough. I'm the low one on the totem pole here, instead of actually trying to train to go for it. And so it is interesting, and I think that is probably a very difficult athlete to work with, because obviously there's a lot of confidence issues there. But that is certainly an athlete who would benefit from a coach training them, not just physically, but working through all those mental, intertwined, I don't want to say mental flaws, but there's certain things that are holding them back from actually achieving any type of physical potential they have inside them.
And it sounds like, without even thinking about it, they're putting in a built-in excuse for themselves, because there is that fear there. They're not putting as much focus into that one drill. Say it's a ladder drill, a footwork drill that they're not very good at, and they just kind of blow it off, or they half-ass it, and that becomes kind of a built-in excuse for them that, hey, I can't do this drill. but I'm good at this over here, so I'm going to work on that. Whether it's, hitting off the tee, playing the tee game, whatever it is, but they're not putting the proper amount of effort into what they need to with, say, a footwork drill or a ladder drill. And that's part of that fear that's built in.
Yeah, and it's certainly like you'll hear it in the blame game a little bit too, because they'll get frustrated and they'll be like, well, my this is what my coach told me to do. I'm doing exactly what my coach told me to do. Like
built-in excuse, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's my coach's fault. And it's easy. That's an easier thing for them to say than to actually look in the mirror and be like, no, this is my fault, right? And we did do an entire podcast on taking ownership, and this all relates. It's all like one could potentially lead to the other, but that, if you have this fear, right, we're never going to unpack it or be able to get past it, right, until we deal with maybe these demons that are causing the fear first. Because it's gonna either just show up at the next level or show up in the next situation, or it's gonna just forever hold you back. And I do think that I don't know how many fearless athletes you see in the transfer portal, and I don't mean to overgeneralize the transfer portal, because there's plenty of good reasons to enter the transfer portal, but I think there's a lot of people who are not willing to take ownership of their current situation or their current failures or their current fear of potential failure at their current situation. And to them, there's an easier path somewhere else, let's say.
Yeah. Be sure to follow us on social media at Jim Tara, at Coach Cassie RB on Twitter, at Coach_Cassie RB on Instagram, and emails your questions as well. JimboPodcast21@gmail.com. If you do have any questions, we will read them here and try to answer them as best we could. We're talking about becoming a fearless athlete, episode 57. Be sure to tune in next week as well, breaking the myth of playing with heart. That is episode 58. But today, episode 57, we're talking about becoming a fearless athlete. And I think, what are some of the things, I'll ask you first, what are some of the elements that you see that holds an athlete back from, you've kind of touched on some of them already, but some of the specific elements you may see both off the field, at the academy, or on the field that you see, or even in your experience from an athlete, that are holding them back from becoming that fearless athlete and ultimately becoming the best peak athlete they possibly could be?
Sure. I've seen injuries lead to that, where I break a hand and all of a sudden we're afraid of swinging at that inside pitch. I've seen not just a little bit of failure, but either like big slump happen, or a really defining moment, like championship game, bases loaded, strikeout looking, like those types of to them was so crushing, let's say, or maybe getting cut from a team, or like certain roadblocks, or that all of a sudden lead to this pent up failure or fear of this potential failure at the next level. I also think fear of commitment too, like you get athlete, and again, I think this stems from like something a little deeper, but they might have an opportunity to go play for a huge next level team. And they're like, that's a lot of traveling. They're really good. I might not get playing time, blah, blah, blah. And I see it. It's what they're saying is, I'm afraid of things I'm gonna have to sacrifice for that level of commitment. I'm afraid if I do go for it and I don't get the playing time, well, did I make the wrong decision? How embarrassing that might be. What will my other teammates say that I just, went to this new travel team and now not even playing on it? They're afraid of showing up to those type of uncomfortable or discomfort feelings that come with that.
It brings me back to when you started, way back when we were starting up the show here. You were talking about, you kind of feared, right, a little bit, the travel team that you were playing on a little bit in high school, and you thought maybe you weren't good enough your freshman and sophomore year, and you realized that, well, I am good enough because there was that evidence there.
I mean, shoot. Thank goodness, though, I had the support system I did, though. I see athletes in that situation that don't have a supportive travel ball coach. They don't have supportive teammates or friends at home. They don't have supportive parents, which is like one of the most crushing things. That should be your teammate for life. And I think, man, if I was in the same situation I was in, but I had your dad, your travel coach, your whatever, I don't think I don't end up at Alabama. I don't end up any of those places. And so it is, you start to like bear eyewitness to just how impactful that support system is for a 13, 14, 15-year-old female or male.
Right. And talking about that fear, parents have to be able to recognize that, I think, in an athlete. It's tough for parents to recognize. So we're going to try to answer that now. How can parents help their kids become those fearless type athletes, because parents, so we know we put a lot of dedication into their kids' playing careers, and wanting to get them to the highest level that they possibly can go.
Yeah, this is hard because you're gonna see it's really hard because a parent wants the best for their kid, right? They're not most parents are not saying or doing anything out of malintent or trying to be malicious or being like, oh, I'm gonna say this because I know it's gonna hurt my kid. No, they're trying to say something to pull them out of it. They've seen them be so successful in certain areas. They see how hard their kid works. They don't want their kid to experience pain. And then when they see them fail at those high, like on the big stage, they're trying to maybe pull them out of it. It's like, swing the bat. Why don't you just swing the bat? And that sometimes is like the most crushing question because the athlete probably doesn't know. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I froze. So I think as much as we want to aggressively fix something that's going on with our athlete or fix it right away or get them to the hitting coach, they have, we got to get this fixed. It might take a little longer and it might need some different questions where it's like, hey, do you feel any different at that at bat than when you do at home? And see what they say. And then it's like, all right, well, let's try to figure out how we can maybe bring those really confident feelings to the plate. Or, you know what, when your hitting coach tells you this, you just seem so much more relaxed. Maybe try to think of that, because you can be such a good asset to your kid, but they are feeling so much pressure from so many different angles. They probably don't need it from their parent too. Granted, and I say that with a grain of salt because at the same time, you're your kid's parent. You know what's best for them. And sometimes kids who are holding back just because of I'm trying to think of a good way. Like some kids might just need to be spoken to a little bit more directly and being like, listen, I'm seeing this get lazy. I'm seeing this, you fall back on this. Like, we need to get a little kick in the pants here and figure out how to get you to that next piece. But you're going to know your kid. I think that's the hope.
It's not easy I want to emphasize with parents, it's not easy because there's that fine line of telling your kids, whatever, to be aggressive and to play hard, and being a fearless athlete. And there's a small difference, fine line, but again, small difference between those three things. And I think parents have to really be careful with that. And it's not, look, I get it. It's not easy. What do we expect parents to go to these coaching type seminars where they learn how to coach their kids? No, of course not. But knowing the difference between wanting your kid to be that fearless athlete and to be aggressive, but not too aggressive that it hurts them and their team, it is very, very important. And I think that maybe it starts with listening more as a parent, listening to your kid and trying to get to understand their mental side. Because if you're a parent, you know your kid better than anybody. So I think you would listen to them on other issues, but when it comes to sports, for some reason, there's at times that blind spot there. So I think listening is the biggest part in helping your kid understand where they are as an athlete and becoming that fearless athlete.
Yeah, I heard something really cool. Actually, someone I used to work with in high school long ago, he coaches, he has a bunch of teams in an organization. And what he tells his parents is, listen, here's the talking in the car on the way home rule. If your kid walks in or sits on the car and he still has his hat on, that means he wants to talk about the game. He wants to, it's bugging him. He wants to talk about it. If he gets in the car and his hat's off, that's his way of saying, I just need a second. And I thought that was so cool because how hard is it sometimes for not even kids, but adults even to verbalize, like, I'm not ready to talk about this yet. And to just have something physical like that has worked, I think, for a lot of families. And it's just a signal to the parent that says, I don't want to do this right now. So, yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. But I do think the whole point of being this fearless athlete is you set up these guardrails and you work really hard and you push past whatever fear and you work so hard to do these things so that you can get to the point of playing in this, like, I really do think the closest to like a euphoric state you can play is when you're playing a game and you're not worried about who the pitcher is, or if you're a pitcher, who the hitter is. You're not worried about who the opponent is, what the stage is, and you're just playing to try to be the best player you can possibly be, to play the best game you've ever played, to play the best practice you've ever practiced, to be the best team you can be. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, who did we just play? I don't care. Look at what we just did. And then now that's like a stress-free, fearless, like, you dive for balls, you get excited, you feel like you're swinging at pitches you want to hit. And That's when our game's played at its best, and that's what.
Yeah, nameless, faceless opponent.
There it is.
It's that point, right?
Yep.
It's not always easy getting there.
Oh gosh, no. And you might get there and fall out of it, but that's the idea, is that we're working for that.
See, that's probably the hardest part, is getting there, but staying in it.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. How many times did you have like a hitting streak and you're like, man, I feel great. Nobody touched me. I don't know when it's going to go.
Yeah. I remember there were times I was going so well that I would say to myself, man, hitting is easy. Boy.
Oh, I know. And
boy, then I would get humbled up quick. I would get humbled up very.
Softball gods. I was like, oh.
They hear that. They hear, it's weird. They hear what you say, and not only verbally, but mentally too. They hear it.
Yeah. They know.
Yeah. All right. Good episode this week. Do you have anything besides next week, episode 58? So be sure to tune in for that when we talk about the myth of playing with heart. Coaches, if you're listening, or any coaches out there, or someone coaches your kid and they say play with heart, do yourself a favor and take your kid off that team. No, don't do that. But just
see where they come from when they do say it.
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it next week.
By the comment.
I'm almost waiting. I'm hoping the universe aligns with me on this. I'm almost waiting for when I have kids and they're being coached by somebody else. 'Cause I don't know about you. I don't know if I'm going to coach my kids. Are you?
I'm not sure. I'm playing it by ear.
Right. I mean, you can individually coach, but I'm talking about like coaching a team. I don't think so. Not for me anyway. But I'm excited for the day when my kids are getting coached by somebody and I hear that coach say, come on, guys, play with heart. Because now it's like you're feeding a steak to a tiger. Boy, I'm ready to go in and, tell the coach, come here. Let's have a chat. So by that time, we'll be on like episode like 305 at that point.
Well, but by the time you have kids, then you're going to.
Long time. Episode 305. All right, next week, episode 58. Tune in for that. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. Be sure to subscribe, Apple, Google, Spotify. Besides family dinner, anything coming up at the Academy we should know about?
No, you know what? If you can't catch every one of our episodes, what our marketing media team is doing is cutting up a lot of these podcasts with neat little clips, and they're going on the Instagram. And then what Jim does a great job of every week is he does a clip on Twitter, so that gets reposted on at Jim Terra, and I don't know my Twitter. My Twitter, I believe, is at Coach _Cassie RB. So you'll see little clips here and there. So if you're someone who doesn't get as much time to listen to long form podcasts, but you want to still stay up to date, I think those are good updates that we put out weekly as well.
And the YouTube page, of course, Softball Strength Academy, has clips and shorts as well. The shorts are a big thing nowadays. Do you have a TikTok? I don't promote that. So you never told me.
It's funny. I do, but I did it purely I was trying to learn about advertising for the company I own, for the three companies I own. So I made a random TikTok and I just started watching anything that had anything to do with advertising. So I just wanted to learn, and it's been a really phenomenal learning tool actually, because the only thing the algorithm is pushing me towards is like the latest, trends and all that. So if you want to just create, like, social media can be used for good, but it can also be used for cat videos and people getting hurt that you laugh at.
Yeah. Or people manipulating what they're doing on the field.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
The power of AI and athletes. That should be a topic we should do.
That's going to be interesting for sure.
Do later on in next year, of course. But AI and athletes, what the AI is doing, not just to athletes, but to life. We'll talk about that, though, I'm sure, next year.
Sure.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. We will talk to you next week, episode 58. Take care.